I've always been intrigued by the existence of twin films, being two different movies with similar plots and sometimes even similar titles produced right around the same time. Some twin films are made with the sole intention of beating another studio to the punch. Like the fact that we got two different 3D animated Ant movies 6 weeks apart from one another in 1998 was not a coincidence. But most of the time, Hollywood just wants to jump on a trendy topic or theme, and that's when you get two or more movies that just happen to be very similar to one another. The least popular, worst reviewed, or last released movie out of the bunch is often labeled the poor man's version, or even worse, the Kmart version, which is exactly what happened in 1999's EdTV. The film follows an ordinary guy who agrees to star in an experimental new reality show that will broadcast every minute of his life. The movie was way ahead of its time, showcasing the deceptive nature of reality television, while also demonstrating society's tendency to obsess over regular, everyday people simply because they're thrust into the spotlight. In today's episode, we'll be looking back on the making, box office bombing, and legacy of EdTV. EdTV might not be a copycat Truman Show, but it actually is a remake. It's based on a 1994 film called Louis the 19th, King of the Airwaves. The movie was about a man named Louis Jobin.
We get home safe, Pistol.
You got it, Jobin.
What?
You nicknamed me Pistol, and I just called you Jobin.
An awkward pushover type guy who wants more than anything to appear on TV. When he wins a contest that promises just that, the network surprises him with an offer to star in his very own reality show, which will broadcast his life 3 months straight for 24 hours a day. Sometime in the mid-1990s, big-time producer, Imagine Entertainment co-founder, and LA Looks hair gel fanatic Brian Grazer was made aware of the movie through an agent who was looking to sell the concept within Hollywood.
So I said, what's it about? And so he gave me the one line on it, and I loved it. So I bought it without ever seeing the movie.
Do you remember what the one line was?
Yeah, it's about a guy that willingly decides to trade his life, essentially, give up all of his freedoms for fame.
After obtaining the film rights, Brian turned to the writing duo of Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel and asked them to write up their own rendition of the story. These writers were responsible for countless celebrated classics throughout the 80s and 90s, and a few underrated gems such as Greedy and Multiplicity. You know, the movie where Michael Keaton cloned himself and all three of his clones slept with his wife, at which point the dumbest one dropped quite possibly the best line in cinema history.
She touched my peppy, Steve.
When it came time for Brian Grazer to find a director for EdTV, he didn't have to look very far. Ron Howard, Brian's other half at Imagine Entertainment, had previously done a docudrama and an action thriller in Apollo 13 and Ransom, respectively. So when EdTV came his way, Ron was immediately drawn to it.
One of the things that attracted me to making EdTV was I hadn't made a comedy since Parenthood, mostly because I hadn't found one that I thought was funny and had a point of view that I could connect with, that I could relate to. I felt that because of my history, my background, my relationship with fans and so forth, that I could do something sort of original with the movie.
In terms of finding someone to play Ed, the creatives weren't sure if they wanted a traditional actor who could play sort of an everyman type character, or a comedian who could elevate the movie into something a bit more zany. But Brian Grazer recalls sort of a bizarre first meeting with Matthew McConaughey that sealed the deal.
He spilled a Coca-Cola in my office. Instead of blotting it up with a paper towel or something, he put his mouth on the table and sucked up the Coke. And I thought it was hysterical. That little thing that he did in my office, married together with what I saw him do in Dazed and Confused, essentially got him the role.
Looking at this casting choice almost 30 years later, it's probably pretty hard to think of Matthew McConaughey as an everyman type. You know, nowadays he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, always doing that weird little move where he stares off into the distance while rolling a booger between his fingers.
When I'm done rolling up this booger, should I eat it or throw it out the window?
And in his Oscar acceptance speech, he thanked his biggest hero, which was himself.
When you won your Oscar, you said your hero was you in 10 years. Did you not know about the weird car commercials?
But remember, this is the same guy who just a few years earlier pulled up to his Dazed and Confused audition wearing a Headbangers Ball tour t-shirt. And you ain't getting much more real than that, brother.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
But EdTV begins with a very in-your-face promo for a complete programming shift on a channel called TruTV. Not to be confused with the real-life TruTV that runs Impractical Jokers and World's Dumbest Criminals on an endless loop. Well, pretty soon it could just be World's Dumbest Criminals.
Joe and Murr couldn't stop themselves from being creepy as fuck, making them tonight's big losers.
But this TruTV is going to dedicate all 24 hours of its programming schedule to a new reality show that focuses on the everyday life of one particular person. They don't necessarily want somebody super interesting or charismatic, but someone who, when they run out of things to do or talk about, will give the viewers a train wreck of a show that they can't take their eyes off of. Matthew McConaughey's character Ed Pickerney is an ordinary 31-year-old guy who enjoys the simplest of pleasures. Collecting chrome hubcaps, a complete, balanced breakfast comprised of unfrosted strawberry Pop-Tarts, and sipping beer from a conveniently placed Houston Oilers koozie during games of pool.
We are doing fine.
You have a beer around your neck.
That's my point.
Content with his station in life and just LIVIN? Sorry, I had to do it. Ed spends his days working at a video rental store where he mostly recommends films starring his favorite actor.
Who's in that? Berton Leon Reynolds Jr.'s in that, boys.
But unfortunately, his Texas taste doesn't mesh very well with the residents of the Bay Area.
Get your raggedy little Steven Seagal loving asses out of here. Who's in this? Burt Reynolds.
Can I laugh in your face? Really? Yes.
When Ed's brother Ray drags him into frame while auditioning for TruTV, the network finds that Ed is actually way more captivating, so they decide to bring him in for a camera test. By the way, Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson, totally believable as brothers. They're both originally from Texas, they have similar mannerisms, and on top of that, it's extremely likely that they could actually be half-brothers in real life.
When you and Woody Harrelson are acting in a scene together, are you sad that somewhere there's a sack not being hacked?
During the network camera test, Ed manages to charm the staff and TruTV producer Cynthia, played by Ellen DeGeneres, with his East Texas drawl.
And did you go to college, or?
I had a year at junior college.
Home with the Bearcats.
Oh, that's cute. The straight ahead.
What? Yeah.
Damn, Ellen was up to that no eye contact shit all the way back in 1999? When Ed is offered the show, he has a few reservations, but they're quickly tossed aside when his brother gives him some much needed tough love around a table jam-packed with KFC.
How many chances do guys like you and I get?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. You don't know.
Man, if you never ate KFC back in the 90s, I truly feel bad for you. Like, I can't even imagine going through life knowing that I never once experienced the feeling of sipping Pepsi through a Darth Maul cup topper, or even a Jar Jar cup topper for that matter.
Excuse me.
But one of the strongest aspects of EdTV that really sets it apart from its contemporaries is the Pickerney family dynamic.
How about sex?
Well, sorry, Al, but I'm gonna have to pass. And it's not an age thing, because you are still a handsome man.
This dialogue exchange around the table is such a great introduction to the family. The standouts for me are Martin Landau as the absent-minded stepfather Al.
All right, how about Mom? Is she around?
She's here. She's in the bedroom. I'd yell for her, but I'd die.
And of course, Woody, whose back must have been killing him after carrying this entire scene.
He's 31 years old. He's a video store clerk. What is he gonna spend the rest of his life rearranging Ernest movies?
As EdTV, the show, gets rolling, a creative decision that really elevated this movie was, instead of hiring a bunch of actors and teaching them how to operate video cameras, Ron Howard figured it would be one hell of a lot easier to just bring in a bunch of actual real-life camera operators and give them a quick crash course in acting.
The video camera people that we'd hired and cast in the roles were, they were all news people.
They did that because all of the video footage for EdTV, the show, and the footage for the movie were shot at the exact same time. Doing things that way added a bit more realism and also allowed for Ron's brother Clint to riff on the footage about a month after it was shot.
Whoa, look at that. Get in on that.
And most of his lines were completely ad-libbed.
Yeah, Doc. Yeah, I stopped payment on the plugs. You gave me doll hair.
But from the moment that Ed scratches his ball bag in the morning, checks out his own ass on television, and holds a one-sided conversation with the camera while clipping his toenails,
If this guy collects his toe cheese, I'm out of here.
the creatives at TruTV begin to question why they picked this guy to be the star of his own reality series. It turns out that hoping for a train wreck of a star might have been a bit of a misstep.
What is that? That is the TV. And where am I? I am on the can. I am on the can, but yet I am still a fan.
Regardless, the show starts out with a small fan base who really can't explain why they like it so much.
No. You look at your husband, okay? I'm gonna make you say my name tonight, woman.
But EdTV begins to find its footing, no pun intended, when Ed's personal relationships come into play. His brother Ray is dating a girl named Sherry that Ed has clearly been pining over for quite some time. When Ray gets caught cheating on her, he sends Ed to her place so he can attempt to patch things up. Not only does she drop an absolute bombshell in regards to Ray's shortcomings in the bedroom,
He's a bad lay. I mean bad.
But it's revealed that Sherry has also had a thing for Ed this entire time. Caught up in the moment, they confess their feelings for one another, completely forgetting that they're on live television.
God!
This is where the plot really thickens because his newly formed relationship with Sherry and the family drama that comes with it causes the show's ratings to skyrocket.
This 31-year-old video store clerk has become something of an American icon, a national obsession.
He has a mass of fans sending him letters of both an affectionate and hateful nature.
Oh, this is cute.
A VIP parking spot in front of the video store.
Oh, I got my own parking spot now. So you in.
Appearances on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And last but definitely not least, he gets to ride the Zamboni at a San Jose Sharks game. As much as I love the not so subtle advertising in The Truman Show,
it's a chef's pal. It's a dicer, grater, peeler, all in one.
Wow.
EdTV gave us a taste of what reality show product placement would look like in years to come. And I'm not just talking about the on-screen ad banners. Although I do love that as the show's viewing audience grows, they go from advertising local businesses to massive brands such as Motorola, Hummer, and Tic Tacs. I'm more so referring to the fact that Ed gets a Reebok sponsorship deal for both himself and his cameramen.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
A Pepsi machine in his living room.
Yes, and it's the choice of a new generation.
And Panasonic hooks him up with a new TV and a massage chair. A bunch of different MTV shows had product placement exactly like this in the 2000s. For example, The Real World encouraged its cast members to wear American Eagle. Budweiser, in an attempt to age down their consumer base, essentially sponsored an entire episode of Viva La Bam.
Help me, please. Give me more Budweiser.
And on Robin Big, they had a fridge dedicated to Monster energy drink in their kitchen. But those few examples are nothing compared to how bad things got in the 2010s. Like Rob Dyrdek's spin-off show Fantasy Factory had entire episodes with subplots dedicated to specific products or brands.
Go wipe yourself down.
A dude wipe? What is this?
It's a wipe for your ass.
Aside from each film's commentary on reality TV product placement, there are definitely a few other similarities between The Truman Show and EdTV. I mean, Harry Shearer plays a television interviewer in both films, which is such a strange coincidence.
My theory is that the hardest work anybody ever does in life is to appear normal.
But also, Dennis Hopper appeared as Ed's estranged father, who suddenly comes back into the fold. Much like Truman's dad, although under very different circumstances.
You don't recognize me?
Dad?
Yeah.
On top of that, Dennis Hopper was originally supposed to play Kristoff in The Truman Show, but he was fired after one day of filming because the director and producer thought that his performance wasn't quite right. Both films also touched on the concept of reality show producers influencing the actions and in turn, the lives of their stars. On the family side, one of my favorite moments in the film comes from Ray writing a tell-all autobiography called My Brother Pissed on Me.
Is that a metaphorical title, or did your brother actually piss on you?
I put everything in the book. Everything.
He never even read a book, man.
But the producers take things a step further when they begin to mess with Ed's love life. The Truman Show gave us a bit more extreme version of this with the character of Lauren, Truman's love interest that the producers didn't want him to be with, so they forcibly removed her from the show. Whereas in EdTV, when the press and viewing audience turn on Sherry and essentially villainize her, she can't handle the pressure and breaks things off.
USA Today, is Sherry good enough for Ed? 71% of the people said.
And so the producer Cynthia convinces Ed to move on to someone else.
Maybe even see other people.
That someone else, a character named Jill, met Ed backstage at Jay Leno, and the audience responded so well to her that the producers essentially orchestrated the start of their romantic relationship.
Do you know the audience is requesting a lot of is that girl Jill?
And I mean, it's Elizabeth Hurley. He had no chance of resisting her feminine wiles. Listen, we all had a copy of Bedazzled on DVD in the early 2000s, and you know damn well it wasn't because of Brendan Fraser. Ah, that's a lie. He was funny as shit in that movie.
You want to play good, and you hope you play good. I think we played pretty good tonight.
But their involvement kicks off one of the funniest segments in the entire film, where the network decides to essentially schedule Ed and Jill's first go at the Horizontal Mambo, treating it with insane amounts of promotion as the must-see TV event of the week. Apparently, these scenes took an entire day of filming to complete, but Matthew McConaughey didn't have a problem with that.
All that kissing stuff was fun, man.
And you took money for that.
I got paid for that.
With a meaningful relationship seemingly ruined, and the televised catastrophe involving his short-lived fling with a rebound, Ed is absolutely miserable and just wants to end the show for good. But it turns out that his contract included a stipulation in which EdTV will continue on for as long as the network wants it to, and they even plan on creating spin-offs for each of his family members. With ratings still soaring high, Ed finds himself completely stuck. Realizing that he needs to turn the tables on the executives to free himself from the show, Ed puts out a call to his audience to find some dirt on one of them, which he'll reveal on air in an attempt to have the show's feed cut short. An anonymous party clues him into the fact that someone at TruTV is equipped with a
penile implant.
And as soon as he goes to reveal who it is, the feed is cut.
The point is, it's a normal medical. What the hell are you looking at, you redheaded putz?
His contract becomes void, and he's free to once again live a normal, off-camera life.
Back to infomercials.
To say that EdTV was overshadowed by The Truman Show would just be a massive understatement. In an attempt to avoid any comparisons being drawn between the two movies, EdTV was shown to film journalists about a month before its Hollywood premiere, at which point Brian Grazer made an effort to do some damage control.
Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is The Truman Show.
I'd seen The Truman Show about 5 months before we started EdTV, and I saw that it was a completely different movie. I mean, our movie is, on the surface, a very big, broad, kind of absurd comedy, whereas The Truman Show was, it was a surrealistic drama. It's really, really different, and it's partly why we're here today. We wanted to show everybody, the movie way early so that they got a sense that it was a comedy and a different picture.
While all of the higher-ups involved with the movie were absolutely freaking out over a potential box office disaster, Matthew McConaughey carried the exact opposite energy. He was just completely unfazed, looking and sounding like he was stoned out of his mind, sipping on yerba mate.
I have a gourd of yerba mate.
Is this marijuana?
It's not marijuana.
Aside from those early showings, every commercial or trailer to try and separate the two films even further made sure to emphasize the fact that Ed agreed to be put on TV.
One television network is about to begin an experiment.
We're going to pick one person. We're going to put that person's life on television.
Morning. I'm Ed.
Did these strategies work? Well, not at all. EdTV failed to make back even half of its budget at the box office. And just about every review of the movie, from the time of its release until even now, makes some mention of The Truman Show.
The shadow of the more adventurous The Truman Show and its similar storyline falls heavily on the new film.
But I'm not going to sit here and act like those comparisons aren't warranted, because, they absolutely are. Especially considering that The Truman Show was so fresh on the mind of pretty much everyone, having been nominated for and winning a bunch of awards right around the time that EdTV released. Another movie, Pleasantville, was sandwiched right between Truman and EdTV and explored similar themes. But Pleasantville acted as more of a social commentary, and aside from the TV angle, really wasn't anything like either of these movies. Although EdTV suffered from extremely unfortunate release timing, it's a solid comedy that also managed to give us a look at the future of entertainment, and in a way, social media personalities. Obviously, the movie took a lot of inspiration from MTV's The Real World, but the portion of the film without producer intervention that's intended to show just how mundane Ed's life is, this is exactly the type of shit that people eat up nowadays on platforms like YouTube and Twitch. But it makes sense that this movie sort of predicted the future of entertainment because the foundations were already set into place. A few years before EdTV was filmed, there was a show called Jenny Cam, in which a girl broadcast her life on the internet for 24 hours a day using a series of webcams mounted throughout her home.
I remember Ron Howard coming to the set the first day. He goes, McConaughey, look at this. There's a girl on the internet who has a webcam in her room, and people pay to go on and just look at that webcam. I go, what does she do? He goes, no, she doesn't do anything salacious. She just gets dressed behind the door, gets in bed and goes to sleep, and people are paying for this.
Nowadays, this seems like nothing out of the ordinary. But this girl legitimately built up so much buzz and such a massive following that she ended up appearing on The Late Show with David Letterman.
Please welcome Jenny Cam's own Jenny.
Where The Truman Show gave us a look at someone who was thrust into fame by literally being born into it, EdTV showcased how easy it is for society to obsess over regular, everyday, ordinary people just because they appear on an electronic box in our homes. One of my favorite lines of dialogue in the movie is, "It used to be that people were famous for being special. Now they're considered special for being famous." The irony being that this quote came from Ed's best friend, who was only invited onto a talk show because of his association with a famous person. But that line still holds true today, applying to reality TV stars and even more so, social media personalities or influencers.
5 big booms!
Anytime a dumb internet meme like the Huck Tua girl or the Island Boys spins out of control, We only have ourselves to blame for giving these people so much attention. But like the movie pointed out, if you stick a camera on someone's face, after a long enough time, almost anyone can seem interesting.
But everybody's interesting, right?
But I definitely recommend checking out EdTV wherever you're able to stream it. If you set aside the instinct to compare it to Truman, you might just have a good time with it. Above all else, I hope this video taught you a valuable lesson about the downsides of fame, as well as just how powerful product placement can be in terms of influencing your purchasing decisions. Listen, I'd love to elaborate on that topic a bit further, but my dinner just popped out of the toaster and I am famished after all this yapping. So I'll catch you guys later. And that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you plan on watching EdTV or what you thought of the movie if you've seen it before. As always, thank you for watching and I'll see you on the next one.
Bert? Bert rules.